We're good. Jim, would you mind opening us in prayer?
Father, we thank you so much that you've given us the privilege of sharing in your purpose and your plan. You've given us minds and brains that are capable of thinking, and yet you tell us in your word what you want us to think. And yet with our minds, we need those things sometimes to use to understand what you want us to think. And so there's a cooperation there between what you've given us to use in our mental faculties and what you provide for us to feed on with our mental faculties. We thank you for your goodness in providing this, and we just trust that we might use our minds and our activities, our thoughts, our actions with each other for your glory, and that our thoughts might be aligned with your thoughts, and that we might be allowing your spirit to freely teach us what you would have for us this morning.
Amen. Well, good morning. So, I'm not going to say I'm not nervous. Kind of like what Dad said, I would be a lot better if y'all had a computer in front of you, because then it made me feel a little bit more like I was really in a teaching situation. So, well, I am going to be doing the lesson on does Christianity treat women poorly? And I've actually have a few different scriptures that we're going to do besides the ones that are here, but we're going to look up all of these. But I wanted to start with just a kind of Tim kind of reviewed this a couple Sundays ago, I guess, when you talked about the complementarian and egalitarian views of just kind of those are the two schools of thought, I guess is the way to put it, as far as the views of women and how what our roles are in the church and that kind of thing. And so I did a little bit of research on my own, and when I looked it up, these were kind of the bullet points that in a really brief, if you want a quick overview without diving deep, because if you dive deep and you look into it and you look at different people, there's actually some overlap between complementarian and egalitarian as far as where people stand. But the basics are complementarians believe that men should hold church leadership positions over other men. Usually women may hold positions that do not place them in authority over men. It's a patriarchal view of the family with the father as the head, and then the view that a man should love his wife as Christ loved the church, and a woman should submit to her husband as the church submits to Christ. That's kind of general complementarian. General egalitarian, men and women can both hold church leadership positions. Spouses are equally responsible for the family. Marriage is a partnership of two equals submitting to one another, and roles should be ability-based and not gender-based. What I found interesting in this particular comparison was that I kind of stand in both camps in some of that. It depends on what we're talking about. So I thought that was just interesting to note that, and I just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this, because I think that too often, instead of just looking at men and women equally, we're constantly trying to compartmentalize in, depending on what we're talking about. Are we talking about church leadership? Are we talking about marriage? Are we talking about staying home, going to work, all those kind of things? And so there's a lot of overlap between the two when you talk about all of those things. So with that, yeah.
What is the word that you use for the general what? General, you said there's complementary view and general.
And then there's the egalitarian.
Say it again.
Egalitarian. Yeah. Yeah. So to start off with, what are some ways that women are mistreated, viewed poorly, treated as inferior? And I'd like to hear, not just even today, but because some of what gets brought up today is looking back at the way women were treated years ago, not necessarily how they are now. So over time, how have women been viewed?
Should have Kylie step out of the page where she just did her Washington State History Fair project, which I think her history fair project on Susan B. Anthony
Mm-hmm,
and women's suffrage.
mm-hmm.
And wow, that's an interesting topic. How did you choose that? I don't know how she did, but maybe I had a list of topics to choose. I don't even know if she would have told you what women's suffrage was, but in listening to her presentation, to answer your question, she said that I think she's talking about 1800s into the 1900s, not the totality of human life. Women were regarded certainly not as equals. In some cases as servants. In many cases less than a man. And I had to remind her, you were always, like there were good dudes back then too.
Right.
But just the perception was, yeah, they don't have the whatever the wisdom to make the right choices in voting. They don't have the capacity to be involved in these types of situations.
Right.
So I would say we've made some good strides. And then I kind of feel like, hey, daughters, you gotta be careful about not going too far.
Right.
On any of this stuff, whether we're talking about women's rights, or minority rights, or religious rights,
Yep, I agree. And it's interesting too. I like the fact that you reminded her we can't say always, because interesting that when I did my National History Day contest project way back when, my senior year, I actually did it on a man, but during the judging competition, one of the questions I was asked, because I happened to do it on James Longmire, who literally blazed the trail over Rainier to get to the west side in Washington. But one of the questions the judges asked me was, why did I think that women got the right to vote, and why women were, they actually got the right to vote earlier in the Western states than they did nationally. And for that very reason, because women out west all of a sudden were not just sitting at home doing crochet and knitting and having tea parties. They were out running the cows, and if the man had to go get supplies, the woman had to stay on the ranch and take care of things, and that meant she had to be able to shoot a gun and all those kind of things. And so it started to change. That whole movement west actually is sort of what changed things for women, because women started to become a part of men's culture and life where they hadn't been before. They had become separated. So very good.
Okay, so I was really surprised teaching our history this last year and a half, because there was societies prior that gave women the right to vote, the right to own property, a lot of things, and I'm thinking, what?
Yep.
They always couldn't.
No.
So, that is just not true, and this whole idea, and by the way, your comment about people staying home and crocheting and having tea parties, that was only in the upper echelons of
Right.
society. All the
Yep.
regular people were out there working there.
But in that time period, you have to also remember, those were the men who were voting as well. If you were a laborer and you didn't own property, you didn't get to vote either.
Right.
So
So-
there were men who that had just as few rights as women in that time period. Although women had even less rights than those men. But
As in the Bible where all the inheritance went to the firstborn son.
Mhm.
You say, well, what about the girls? And of course, we have the example in the Bible of the one man that had no sons, and so the women got it.
Mhm.
But that also excluded all the rest of the boys.
Exactly. Yep.
So.
Because only only the one got everything.
Yeah, so, you have to look at this topic with a full view, because it's not just, I think one of the arguments they made, and it's true in our household, is, look, they give women the vote, they're gonna vote just like their husbands. Well, Gary and I always vote the same, because we don't want to jeopardize each other's votes. So we do that.
Yep.
So that idea is still out there regardless of if you have the vote or not.
Right. Yeah, Gary.
One thing I've, was thinking about, as we were talking about this, is throughout my life and when I've always heard, wait till your dad gets something.
Mm.
And so I think dad, and then when you get home, the dad gets home and he's exhausted. And he's expected to deal with this problem. So why should the children fear their dad more than their mom?
I'm gonna say that was not the case in my house. There was no wait until the dad got home, mom took care of it, let me tell you. And we were actually probably, I think if I talked to all 4 of my siblings, we'd all say we were more scared of mom than dad. So, yeah, but that I would agree that for the most part, that is what most people heard was, yeah, wait till your dad gets home. And I never understood that either. But again, partly because the way I grew up.
That's postponing it.
Mm.
Passing on the
I think that as an educator, I think sometimes that's partly what it is kind of like you go to the principal's office, I'm not going to deal with it, but the principal's going to. It's kind of that same idea, that fear behind, oh, I'm going to go see the big person, Not that that's necessarily a good thing though. So, any other thoughts on how women have been mistreated or?
Well, if we go back to Genesis 1, why did God make woman? He needed a helpmate. So that's what it is. That it's in that definition right there. It doesn't mean that the man's going to lord over the woman all the way because he needed somebody to help him.
Yep, exactly. Mhm.
I think historically, one of the things that tends to stand out is women could be servants. In other words, they worked in a household with some position, but they couldn't own a business. But they were perfectly capable to have
A
all
menial
kinds of-
job of some sort.
right. And
They
they
could have
provided
a
for
business,
that
I don't know what period of history you're talking about, but even in the early American history, if a woman's husband died, he ran the business, but
Mhm.
if he married, then it became her
Husbands, right?
So, that again is
Yeah,
got some nuance to it.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest way women have been abused is sexually.
and that's the one that I hadn't heard yet, and that's what I was, and to me, that's probably the top one is, and we see that even today, and culturally, there's still a sex symbol, even though we've had all of this women's rights and women's liberation and all of that kind of stuff. Women are still, I'm going to be extremely controversial here and say that even with the trans movement, when those men are transitioning to men, they're doing so most of the time in very sexualized ways. They're dressing sexual, they're acting. It's a sexualized thing. And so, and yes, women have been very mistreated. They've been sex slaves. They've been, all kinds of stuff throughout history.
It'd be interesting to see state by state, when women had the right to vote, because I know we were visiting Arizona a few years ago, and they said, I think it was 1918, when women got the right to vote in Arizona.
Mhm.
So every state.
Every
made
state,
their
yep.
own
They did,
rules.
and that's where I was saying the western states actually had the right to vote for women. Women could own property, women could own businesses. There was all kinds of things that women could do much earlier in the western states than the eastern states in the US. And again, it was a lot of that was because women were becoming a part of men's culture. They were proving themselves basically.
So just with the idea of what you're saying, basically, women that were from like the colonies or whatever, there was still a lot of British influence there, which that culture was very much like the women, should be at home and cook and raise kids and they shouldn't vote and all that. And so that moved over to the colonies when the colonies were, building or whatever. But then when they came to the West, it was a different situation. They had to conform to what needed to be
Right.
said.
And what we're going to see as we go through this is we're going to see that biblically, none of this was true, right? When if you read, and we're going to look at the Proverbs 31 woman, she had a business. I mean, when you look at even in the New Testament, there, the women, they owned businesses. So where did that shift happen? Well, in the little bit of looking that I did, and a lot of that shift happens, I'm going to say in, after Christ, it happened. It started to happen somewhere around the probably 300-400 when there really began to be a really negative look at women. And so I'm just going to read you some quotes that I found that are old of what men thought of women. And these are church people. So this is Tertullian, the father of Latin Christianity. And so I remember I read, he's actually the person who came up with I can't remember what it is now, but anyway, he said, a woman is a temple built over a sewer.
Is a what?
A woman is a temple built over a sewer. And he said that in 160 AD. He lived 160 AD to 225 AD. Yeah.
But does it mean that there's a beautiful woman that has a sin nature?
I'm
It
not
could be
sure
true.
what that could be true. I don't know. It's just one of the quotes that they had of, some of the and that what I actually looked up was founding fathers of Christianity. What did they say about women? That's what I just want to know. So these are just some quotes that came up. This is Martin Luther. And of course, we know Martin Luther was 1483 AD to 1546. He said, the word and works of God are quite clear that women were made to be wives or prostitutes. I know that one shocked me. I'm like, whoa, Martin, come on now. The word and works of God are quite clear that women were made to be wives or prostitutes. And then Saint Clement of Alexandria was a Christian theologian from 150 AD to 215. Every woman should be filled with shame and thought that she is a woman. Right? I know. Just our very existence is shameful, I guess. Saint Augustine, Bishop of Hippo Regius, he lived 354 AD to 430 AD. Woman was merely man's helpmate, a function which pertains to her alone. She is not the image of God, but as far as man is concerned, he is by himself the image of God. So men, you're the image of God, we're not, according to Saint Augustine.
Wow, I learned something new.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the website that I got this from, this was their opening. American Christian, and this is from christiansforsocialaction.org. If you want to go and see it, the article was "The Church's Oppression of Women." American Christianity has been a horrible place for women. It ignores them, abuses them, assaults them, objectifies them, oppresses them, and then attempts to theologically rationalize it all as being, quote, biblical and, quote, holy. The church has been a willing co-conspirator to the widespread affliction of women. I can't disagree because I just read quotes from men who claim to be Christian. However, I think that we can go through and look at the verses that we're going to look at and show that it's not biblical, that is not at all what God intended. From, as Dad pointed out, from the very beginning, that is not what God intended. So those are my quotes for what do you or others think the Bible or the church teaches about women. So before I move on with the verses, anybody else want to comment on that question? Yeah.
Something that's not quite that question. This is more the why rather than how they've been abused, but why. And this comes from understanding that it's not only cultures that hold to a Jewish heritage, that you have that Old Testament cultural elements coming in. Cultures that don't have that as part of the background still have a preponderance of male having women with under their thumbs type of attitude. And that comes from a basic understanding of our sin nature, of what selfishness is. One of the manifestations of our sin nature, and selfishness is most prominently manifested by the stronger bullying over the weaker, physically stronger bullying over the physically weaker. And that's evident in every society. It doesn't have to be Christian, Jewish, Hindu, whatever it is. The stronger tend to bully over the weaker. And elements of the sin nature were addressed under the Mosaic law, but not all of the elements of the sin nature. And that's one of the elements that wasn't really focused on predominantly under the law. It wasn't dealt with until the New Testament, but until Christianity anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a sin problem. Yeah.
I got an email from a friend who was getting, I think it was last week, maybe the week before. Anyways, he works with one of the tribes. And his Jim was saying, I mean, it's pretty true. Like, I think if Lindsay was 40 pounds bigger than me and stronger than me, there could be like, yeah, it's you know, men a little bigger and stronger on it, right? And in Papua New Guinea, you see that they do not culturally view a man or woman by any means. So it's really interesting when the gospel goes forward because they have to reposition their thinking pretty substantially. It's integrated into their culture. And he just said a few things in his last email. He said, you know, at the last, I don't know if they're in a conference or whatever, he said the families were eating together. Not normal. Like the men eat together, the women eat together. He said we're not yet at the shining star of what a marriage should look like. We're moving toward that. And so, anyways, I think that Christ's impact can change some of those.
Yeah, I would, my view is that in a Christian marriage, that affords the greatest liberty and protection, comfort, provision that you could ever have. That's my view. I mean, with a man that's operating according to our God, you know, that I am a part of his own flesh. I mean, what could you ask for better than that? Really?
Yep.
One thing that comes to my mind is that man and woman were made differently. Woman was taken from made from a rib, and that's the softest bone in the body.
Get deep, Garrett.
And it goes along with what Leslie was just saying, because to me, that was the beginning, the fact that the woman was made from a part of the man. That just is, it's a picture of that you're meant to be complements of each other. You're meant to fit together, not butt heads, not, you're meant to work together in unison.
She was taken from man when God saw what he created to be good before it fell. So
Mhm.
she was taken from something that was good.
Was already
and was
good.
Still taken. Sure.
Mhm.
Take that for what you want.
I know there's we could go really deep here.
Now, Rob,
Speaking of which, that's where I want to start. So if we can turn to Genesis 1:26,
Which verse, sorry?
1:26,
What verse?
Genesis.
Genesis.
Yep, Genesis 1:26. And Kenya, can we start with you? We're gonna read 1:26 and 28.
Then God said, let's make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and over the livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. 27.
Yep, please.
So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created male and female. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves on the ground.
Okay, so I have these verses for a reason. Anybody know why?
Augustine the Bronx.
Yes.
God bless them.
Yes, thank you. It's the them. He blessed them, not just Adam. It wasn't that God said, and God created man in his own image, in the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Then he blessed them. God said to them, didn't say to Adam. He said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing. So have dominion. Have dominion means to do what? To rule. He didn't tell Adam to rule. He told Adam and Eve to rule together. It wasn't just Adam. So if we turn to 2:18 through 25. Lindsay, if you could read those. Yep. To 25.
The Lord God said, it is not good for a man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the beasts of the field and all the birds of the air. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living thing, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock and birds of the air and the beasts of the field. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. He shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. The man and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame.
So I included that one because we were told women were supposed to be ashamed, and Eve was created and from the beginning had no shame. Okay. And not only that, but we already talked about, Adam was created and God saw there's nobody to help him, nobody to be with him, nobody to stand beside him, for him to communicate with, all of the things that are a part of a relationship. And so he made Eve. So then that takes us to where everything went awry. So just so that we don't forget, go to Genesis 3:16. Ben, could you read there, please?
Yep. 3:16. Yeah. John 3:16.
No, Genesis 3:16.
The woman, he said, I will greatly increase your, oh, this is
Yeah.
your pains in childbearing. With pain, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, or be over him, and he will rule over you.
Thank you. So, chain of events. Adam and Eve are created. Adam and Eve sin. They've been cursed. Adam has his curse. Eve has her curse. Adam's curse, we know, is that he's going to have to work the land. He's going to have to toil, and it's not going to be easy. He's what it says. If we keep reading, his is that in 17, in toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life, both thorns and thistles. Anybody ever gardens, you know what we're talking about. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. So, but Eve, well, we get pain in childbirth, and we want to be above our husband, but we don't get to be. It's part of our curse. Keep that in mind, it gets better. It doesn't stay. So now what I want to do is I want to look at these other verses that are here and just kind of take a look at how the Bible, some of the women in the Bible and the roles that they play. So we'll start with Exodus 15:20.
And just an aside, Carly.
Mhm.
First of all, those verses you just read are like some, and I like how we all just read it, nodded our head, like, yep, that's crazy stuff, right? I mean, the creation of man, it really is. It's one of those things you go, okay, God, if you were going to create it in a really crazy way, so we could go, you're the God of all things, and you can do anything. There you go. But the woman's curse would be pain and child, how does that child bearing, birthing? Anyways, I wonder what the plan A was.
I've always wondered that myself.
How is this not going to be painful? Yeah, anyways, it's just a thought, like, I wonder how he was going to, maybe it was going to be a natural release of, what are they?
Endorphins.
Epidural, maybe it was gonna be a natural epidural, I don't know.
Yeah.
And the curse, it's interesting how we scientifically kind of bypass this a little bit. You don't need to be like thwarting God's plan, that, you can have a fairly pain-free birthing experience now in first world countries. And I don't see too many farmers around here, an air conditioned
Tractors.
tractors going. That was a lot of work. I mean, in third world countries, oh, hot mama, right?
Mhm.
So interesting how
We've made life easier for ourselves along the way.
we have.
Along with science.
Yeah. All the irony. What's your science?
Good.
Gary, Exodus 15:20, please.
15:20.
Uh-huh.
15 or 16? Oh, 15.
It's 15, yeah.
Okay. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand. All the women went out after her with tambourines and dancing. Sang to them, sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. and his rider he has thrown into the sea.
Thank you. So yeah, so here we have Miriam, sister of Aaron and Moses. And Moses and Aaron are right there. But Miriam has stepped up, and not only has she stepped up to lead the, and it does say that she's leading the women. It doesn't say that men were singing and dancing with her. So you could make the argument that she wasn't, leading men. This was just for women, but I'm sorry. I'm sure the men were right there watching, and very likely singing along. But it also, she was a what? Prophetess. Okay, so that's an important role in the Bible, right? I mean, that's not a submissive role. That means that she had the ability to even tell Moses and Aaron, no, this is what's going to happen. Okay, if God gave her the word. So let's move on and look at another woman, Judges 4:4-6.
You want me to read?
Yes, please.
Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill of the country of Ephraim, and the sons of Israel came up to her for judgment. Now she sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, Behold, the Lord, the God of Israel, has commanded, go and march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the sons of Naphtali and from the sons of Zebulun.
Okay.
And then 5:7,
Mhm.
the peasantry ceased, they ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel.
So here we have Deborah. She was a
Prophetess and a judge.
and a judge. Exactly. Now, a judge at that time was the equivalent of a what? What was a judge would have been equivalent to
Judge. Or ruler?
a ruler. Yeah, I mean, it was the head person that they came to get things resolved if they had an issue that needed to be resolved. And then she was also a prophetess. And in this case, not only is she a prophetess, but she's also to some degree involved in the military, right? I mean,
She's able to.
she's able to rally the troops and get the
Well,
troops
the
to.
judges sat in the gate and the people came to them to solve their problems.
Mhm. Yep. All right, then let's go to 2 Kings.
I was gonna add a detail on that.
Yeah.
Like that statement in verse 7, it says the peasantry ceased and they ceased in Israel. We don't even know what that means, but that would be royal city. That would be villages where you had farmers that lived, because farmers didn't live on their farms. Farmers lived together in a community and they went out and fought and spread it out around there. What had happened was because of the other nations that were around them that were causing them problems, they had left their farms, they had left the rural areas, and they'd all been moving into larger cities because of this until God brings her along to start judging and then eventually corrects the warfare that gets these people off so people can actually return to their land. So kind of put that in perspective. If you imagine if all of us had to move to Spokane or the Tri-Cities or Wenatchee because it was too dangerous to live in Royal City, because you have raiders coming in all the time. So that kind of maybe puts in perspective part of the role that God gave her and what she was doing for the people.
So she was a protector.
Yes.
All right, so 2 Kings 22:14. Linda, could you read that for us?
So
Right, but the thing. That's right. Zephaniah, actually went out testing. Do a prophetess, like a Shalom, son. Right, and the keeper of the wardrobe. She dwelt in Jerusalem for the second quarter and spoke with her.
Okay, so again, just another, this is Huldah, and she's a prophetess. And it also says she was also
Keeper.
she was a keeper of the wardrobe, and she was a wife and a mother. So it wasn't that she was just a prophetess. She filled all these roles. So she was a mother, she was a wife, she was a prophetess, and she was a keeper of the wardrobe. Not exactly sure what it means to be a keeper of the wardrobe, but I'm assuming it was a position. Yeah,
Making clothes or?
I'm not sure. Tim, do you have any idea what
It
it
had
would?
to do with the fact that just like you had a person that guarded the king's food and the king's cup, a person that guarded his wardrobe, because you could shame the king by
Dressing him inappropriately
Yes.
or
exactly destroying his clothes.
wrong colors or
Think about people these days that go out with people wearing furs and people throw red paint on and stuff like that. You're destroying it. So.
Okay.
To me, I'm amazed when I think about that these men didn't hesitate to go ask her as a prophetess to see what God says they should do.
Especially one of them was a priest himself.
That's right. Yeah, you thought he would have been able to figure this out, but no, they still went to a prophetess. Yeah.
All right, Isaiah, actually, let's do Proverbs because I wanted to do Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31, and we're going to start at verse 10. And go to the end, if you don't mind, Stan. Proverbs 31:10. Through the end, if you're okay with that, or you can stop partway and.
Just the one verse.
No, 31:10 through the end of the chapter.
Who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? The heart of her husband is safe and trust in her, so that he shall have one meaning for it. She will do in good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh woman and plots and worketh with her hands. She is like a merchant ship, she brings her food from afar. She raised also while she was yet night, and gave meat to her house and that portion to her neighbors. She considers a field and buys it. Yet the fruit of her hand she plants a vineyard. She girds her loins with strength and strengthens her farm. She perceives that her merchandise is good. Her candle goes not out at night. She lays her hands to the spindle and her hands hold the distaff. She stretches out her hand to the poor. Yea, she reaches forth and hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household of clothes is scarlet. She makes herself covering to the tapestry, and clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. He makes fine linen and sells it, and delivers pearls to under the merchant. Strength and honor are clothing, which shall rejoice in kindness. He opens her mouth to wisdom, and the tongue is about kindness. She looks well to the ways of her household, and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children raise up and call her blessed. Her husband also makes praise of her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but no excellence than all.
favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that fears the Lord she shall be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands and let her own works praise the day.
Okay, so this isn't a particular woman. We're not given a name. But when we read this, what does this woman do? Is she just sitting at home cooking and taking care of her children?
She makes it so her husband does not have to work. She has-
You certainly do wonder what the husband is doing, because his only mention is he sits among the elders of the land at the gate. That's what he does. He's ruling, exactly. But what we see here,
Do that if you didn't have her at home, taking off the business.
but that's exactly what she's doing. It's not just their household, is it? She's running businesses. She is buying and selling land. She is buying and selling goods, and not just to feed her household, but to, you know, provide money for the household. So this idea that women only fit in one role, and then it goes on. She opens her mouth with wisdom. She opens her mouth. Now you'll see when we get further down here that all of a sudden at some point somebody decided women weren't supposed to speak. Well, she's opening her mouth with wisdom here. We've had prophetesses and judges who they're having to speak in order to fulfill their positions. So I thought this was a great just reminder of all of the things that women are capable of doing. Now, do all women have to do all of these things? No, the point is you do what is needed to stand by your man.
She's an M part of the next.
Yeah, she is like she's got her finger in lots of pies, basically, is what we see here.
Can I
All right.
Throw something out there.
Yeah.
Important to remember that while the things that are said here about God and mankind's nature in the Old Testament are true, some of these things aren't necessarily a blueprint for how we should be living our lives in the New Testament. In the New
Right.
Testament, the role that's ascribed to the husband is head of the wife, which indicates to me a responsibility to relieve her of much of this responsibility. He's supposed to treat her tenderly and to comfort and to provide and to care. So that indicates a lot of this role is reversed. That whatever his roles are as ruling, his responsibility is to provide and care for the needs of the wife. And so in the New Testament, some of this responsibility looks like it's in my mind, it's put more on the husband than it is on the wife. While this character is still true, this still demonstrates a virtuous character. The husband is to take this role primarily upon himself and relieve her of that toil.
Right, which goes to the whole idea of, if the man is to love the woman as Christ loved the church, then that's what he's going to do, because that's what Christ would have. Christ tells us that he would take on our burden. We don't have to carry it alone.
He
So,
provided the means to give us rest.
mhm.
The only other thing I said, you have to go back to Genesis, when it says they. You have to consider, if you look at that, as they go through the Old Testament, New Testament, that the man and the woman are a unit.
Mhm. Well, and that there's a unit here, even though we're told all of the minute things. It's unfortunate that we don't have a Proverbs 32 that tells us what the man did, because I'm sure that within his role of ruler, he had a whole long list of things that he was doing as well. We just aren't given that for whatever reason.
But Proverbs does talk about.
It talks about all the
lazy.
exactly.
fools.
If you read all of Proverbs, yes, the whole of Proverbs is really directed to, all the things that you shouldn't do and how to have a virtuous character.
So this passage kind of reminds me of in Genesis when God made woman to be the helpmeet for the man. When the woman is taking care of all of this stuff, that frees her husband up to take care of his responsibilities.
Right.
So she is helping. And I don't think that she's usurping authority of him, but she
No.
is supporting him by taking care of.
She's filling in the gap where he needs the gap
And
filled.
it allows him to do what he needs to.
Right, exactly. I would agree.
I was gonna. This is something was pointed out in seminary, but it comes out several times in here, in verse 10. And I just went through and looked at all the English Bibles I have on my iPad here. And the only one that I found that does a good job is the HCSB. And the HCSB, let me pull it up here again. I just had it and I closed
Verse
it.
10.
There's 10. This is-
Capable.
Yeah, HCSB, who can find a capable woman or
Mhm.
capable wife? All the rest of them translate noble, excellent, virtuous. It's the word heal. If you go and do a word study on that, it occurs 226 times, it meant strong. It was what you wanted in warriors. It's used to describe warriors when they go off to battle. You got a woman doing all this, you can't have a frail little gal. It's like, you gotta have a woman that's got some strength to her to do these things. And he uses that again in 17, he girded himself with strength. That's the Hebrew word oaths. I still really remember that one, because in Hebrew class, you were trying to find things to help you remember word. The Wizard of Oz, Oz, was supposed to be strong, and then she makes her arm strong, and then you have Oz again in verse 25, strength, and then majesty or her clothing. This is a strong woman. She's got strong arms, strong back, strong legs. I mean, she's able to be doing all this work that, I read that thing and I'm going, I'd be exhausted myself, working as hard as she is.
One thing I think we all need to realize, and it's something I've learned experientially, as you have children that grow up and marry, all men and all women are not the same, and all marriages are not the same. And what a husband and wife decide how they're going to merge and work together is not going to be the same.
Mhm.
And in grace, we need to not be judgmental about how another person handles their marriage, because I don't care if they grew up in their house or if, there's gonna be similarities, but they're not going to be identical, because every woman is not the same, and every man is not the same.
Mhm. Yep, exactly.
But I think that's why he's saying, what if you can find a strong gal? He said that was a value in that. But does that mean if you find somebody that you fall in love with and she's not strong, that you've lost? No, I don't think so either. But the reason I was pointing that out is our English Bibles, a lot of times they hide that in verse 10. They hide it as, so you're looking for a virtuous, we sit around and think about, what does it mean to be a virtuous woman? What does it mean to be a excellent woman? Rather than actually reading the text.
A wife of.
A wife of strength. Capable is the HCSB, the way they translate it. But the HCSB is capable, yeah. But it's literally in Hebrews, it's a woman of strength.
Is there anywhere in there that refers to a mental strength as well, or is it just talking about?
It's talking about physical valor. The way it is. So.
Well, guess personally, I like the other translation a little better. I mean, I guess it doesn't say that. But I would like it to be noble character or virtuous,
Right.
because I don't care if she's wimpy. In the sense of physical strength, because there's lots of women that I wouldn't say, man, that girl's jacked. But when she lives out this lifestyle, it's strong, regardless of what her bench press or squat max is. That's.
I don't know, I would argue that in just the whole thing demonstrates mental strength. I don't think you can do all of those things and manage all of those things. I mean, think about that. That's a lot of stuff to be juggling. It's a lot of, and that takes mental strength. It makes depth. It takes mental acuity, to be able to, keep that many balls in the air.
But she didn't do it
basically.
By herself. She had
Oh, no, she had people,
servants, she
but
had
still, even
employees
that, even
were
that,
doing
I
it,
mean,
but she's
She's
correct.
over them, right?
right, she's over them, but even that, not everybody can do that. That, even that requires, I mean, it requires so much. I mean, that you could read so much into this because, I mean, we think about it, a boss, you need to have, not only do you need to have grace, but you need to have the ability to stand up to people and, tell them what should be done, even, no matter what, this is the way it is, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And so there's a lot of, I think, mental things that you can
And there's
see in that.
obviously virtuous aspects as well. Verse 20, she opens her arms to the poor, extends her hands to the needy.
Hmm.
That doesn't depend on your physical strength.
Right.
Part of.
there's you when you read there's definite comments to her ability to have compassion as well as mental strength and wisdom. I mean, it says she speaks with wisdom, so it's really, it's all there.
And so I appreciate what you're saying, because when you go through there, it talks about the other side of this, that there is good character. My wife will make these comments once in a while when something comes up, there'll be somebody online and there's some woman saying, you can do this program, and there's some gal that she's always there and they're in these, short tops and everything, showing off all their muscles and abs and everything. And then they talk about this and Peg goes, well, that's fine if you don't have anybody else to take care of, or you don't care about anything else but yourself,
Right.
that you can devote that many hours a day to doing all that kind of stuff. But she says, life, that's not real life for most people. Those people make their money making videos to show you what you can look like if you devote yourself to making videos of looking like that.
When that's your career.
Yeah.
Well, I have a comment about this, is that you don't marry in their day, 17, 18, 15-year-old woman, and she can do all that. She grows.
Oh, she grows into that. Definitely, most definitely. Yeah. This was a woman who was probably, older. Yeah, definitely. She's been doing this for a while. And she didn't start out at the beginning of her marriage doing all of that. All right. Any other comments before we go on to, oh, no, we're out of time. I looked up once, no, see? All right, we need to close. Dad, could you close us in prayer, please?
Our Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time that we can look into the role of a woman and a wife, and a housekeeper and friend. We thank you for the comments that have been presented, and we thank you for your son who actually went to the cross for us, so we can have equality to each other and to you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.